The Bravo Clubhouse had never felt this tense. Watch What Happens Live was supposed to be fun. Prince Harry sat in the guest chair, surrounded by the signature blue walls, and the energy of a show that existed specifically to make celebrities uncomfortable in the most entertaining way possible. But something was wrong from the first moment. Not the setup, that was perfect. Not the atmosphere, that was electric. It was Harry himself. Andy tried his usual approach, disarming humor. Harry wasn't warming. Then Andy suggested a game. Plead the fifth. Answer the question, take a shot, or plead the fifth. What Harry said when Andy asked his first question made the studio go silent. What Andy said after that made the bartender freeze mid-pour. And what happened in the final 10 minutes, the confrontation about things Andy had said about Harry on previous shows, the moment Harry finally lost his composure, would become the most watched WWHL episode in the show's history. This is the interview that shocked everyone. Subscribe now, hit that notification bell, and let's see what happened. The Watch What Happens Live studio, the famous Bravo Clubhouse, had its usual chaotic energy. Blue neon lights, the well-stocked bar, the live audience with drinks in hand. Andy Cohen behind his desk, preparing for what his producers called the biggest booking of the season. Harry arrived with security that seemed absurd for a Bravo studio, multiple guards trying to look inconspicuous in a room designed for celebrity chaos. He walked in with controlled posture, shook Andy's hand briefly, settled into the guest chair like someone expecting a board meeting rather than a late-night party. "Prince Harry, welcome to the clubhouse." "Andy, thank you for having me. We're going to have so much fun. That's the whole point of this show. Drinks, games, viewer questions. Just roll with it." The cameras went live. The audience cheered. "First things first," Andy said, sliding a drink across to Harry. "Clubhouse rules. Everyone drinks on this show. It loosens you up, makes the conversation flow." Harry looked at the glass. "I'll pass on the alcohol tonight." "Pass? Nobody passes. The drink is part of the format." "I'm choosing not to drink." Andy's smile flickered slightly. "Okay, water it is. But fair warning, the questions are the same whether you're drinking or not. The alcohol just makes them easier." "I can handle questions." "Can you? Because I've had real housewives in that chair who thought they could handle questions. They were wrong. And they had alcohol helping them." The audience laughed. Harry didn't. "Let's talk about what everyone's been discussing," Andy said, leaning forward with characteristic directness. "The divorce rumors. They're everywhere. Every tabloid, every entertainment show. Even my housewives are talking about it. What's actually happening?" "Tabloid fiction." "Fiction that multiple outlets are reporting with specific details?" "Financial disagreements, separate schedules. You wanting to go back to England while she doesn't. That's not fiction, that's pattern. Patterns manufactured by hostile media. Hostile media that correctly predicted several things about your situation before you confirmed them. Sometimes hostile media is also accurate media. Are you and Meghan okay?" "We're fine." Fine. The most defensive word in the English language. When people say fine, they usually mean anything but. What's actually fine about your marriage right now? Harry shifted uncomfortably. "I won't detail my relationship on a Bravo show." This Bravo show has gotten confessions from people who never thought they'd confess anything. The format works. Either engage with it or explain why you're here. "Let's play a game," Andy said. "Plead the fifth. I ask a question. You can answer honestly. Take a shot, water in your case, or plead the fifth. 3 questions. 1 plead aloud." "I'm not playing games." "You came on a game show. WWHL is literally built around games. Refusing to play defeats the purpose." "I came for conversation." "Conversation on this show includes games. That's the deal. Everyone plays. Tom Hanks played. Jennifer Lawrence played. You're not above the format." Harry crossed his arms. "I'll answer direct questions." "These are direct questions. just in game format. First question. What's one thing about your brother you genuinely miss? Silence. That's a softball. I started easy. What do you miss about William? More silence. Plead the fifth if you want, but the silence is answering for you. I've talked about you on this show, Andy said, shifting approach. With other guests, we've discussed your situation, the book, the documentary, the family dynamics. I haven't been gentle. Does that bother you? Harry's expression darkened. You've been critical without understanding context. Have I? I've read your book. I've watched your documentary. I've followed your interviews. What context am I missing? The complexity of my situation. Complexity that you've explained extensively, in hundreds of pages, in hours of footage. If the complexity isn't clear after all that explanation, maybe it's not complexity, maybe it's contradiction. That's unfair. That's observation. You've given us mountains of information. We've processed it. Some of us arrived at conclusions you don't like. That's not unfairness. That's analysis. Harry grabbed his water. You've made jokes at my expense. I make jokes at everyone's expense, including my own. If you can't handle jokes, late night isn't for you. Welcome to entertainment. The family exclusion, Andy continued. Peter Phillips's wedding. You weren't there. Reports say you weren't invited. That the family specifically excluded you to prevent, what was the phrase? Drama. How did that feel? Scheduling conflicts. Scheduling conflicts for a family wedding? You're not working a traditional job. What schedule conflict could prevent attending your cousin's wedding? Personal commitments. Personal commitments that coincidentally align with reports you weren't wanted. The family reportedly feared your presence would create a media circus. Is that accurate? I don't control what reports say. You control whether you attend. You didn't. Either you chose not to go, or you weren't invited. Which is it? Harry said nothing. The silence is interesting. Both options are uncomfortable. If you weren't invited, that says something about your standing with the family. If you chose not to go, that says something about your priorities. Either way, you're not there. And you're here, unable to explain why. Let's do viewer questions, Andy said, pulling out his cards. The audience gets to ask things directly. That's how this show works. I'll answer what I choose. Of course, but dodging looks worse on live television than just answering. First viewer question. At Royal Watcher asks, have you spoken to your father in the last month? Harry hesitated. Our communications are private. Private. After you published a book about him. After Netflix documented your conflicts. Privacy is something you invoke selectively. Have you spoken to him? Recently, yes. What did you discuss? I won't detail private conversations. You detailed plenty in your book, including things he said to you. The privacy principle is inconsistent. You share when it serves your narrative. You claim privacy when questions get uncomfortable. Harry stood up slightly. This is becoming hostile. This is becoming specific. There's a difference. Here's what I've observed, Andy said, his playful tone shifting to something more direct. And I've observed a lot of people in this chair. Celebrities in crisis, reality stars in meltdowns, people at their most vulnerable and most defended. He looked at Harry directly. What I'm seeing from you is total defense. Every question gets deflected. Every topic gets rerouted to how unfair the question is. In this room, that doesn't work. People come here and let their guard down. That's the whole point. You refuse to let your guard down about anything. My guard exists for a reason. Your guard exists because you've decided everything is an attack, including this show, apparently. I'm not attacking you. I'm asking questions. The same questions I'd ask anyone. The same questions every talk show asks. You're treating them like warfare. The media has treated me unfairly. Some media has, not all. I'm asking about your family. about your marriage, about why you're excluded from events. Those are legitimate questions. Your experience with unfair media doesn't make all questions unfair. You've called me a walking contradiction on this show, Harry said, his composure cracking. I heard about it. Multiple episodes discussing my life like I'm a real housewife. Andy smiled, genuinely. I said that because it's true. You complain about privacy while doing documentaries. You talk about wanting peace while publishing attacks. You claim to value family while being estranged from yours. Those are contradictions. I point out contradictions for a living. It's literally my job. Context matters. Context you've provided extensively. We have context. Books of context. Hours of documentary context. The contradictions exist within your own provided context. That's the issue. You don't understand the pressures. I understand entertainment pressure. I've been doing this for decades. What I don't understand is someone who controls their narrative more completely than any celebrity I've ever met, claiming they're misunderstood. You've had more opportunity to explain yourself than almost anyone in media history. If people still don't understand, maybe the explanation is the problem. One more viewer question, Andy said. Then we'll see where we are. At Truth Hurts asks, what have you accomplished since leaving royal duties that wasn't handed to you because of your title? Harry's face went red. I've built meaningful work. Name one thing, specifically, something that exists because of your effort, not because Netflix paid millions for your royal story. Not because publishers wanted royal drama, something you created from nothing. Archwell, which raises money because you're a prince, which gets attention because you're royal. What have you done that would matter if you were Harry Smith from nowhere? The Invictus Games, which you founded as a prince, with royal connections, using royal visibility. What have you built without the title? Silence stretched devastatingly. The silence is the answer. Everything you've done depends on who you were born. When people ask what you've earned versus inherited, you have nothing to say. Because there's nothing to say. Harry grabbed his jacket. I'm done with this. Andy didn't move from his seat. Of course you are. That's the pattern. Interviews get uncomfortable, you leave. Questions get specific, you exit. You've walked out of more interviews than any public figure I can name. Running is your brand at this point. I won't be mocked. You won't be questioned. That's different. Mocking would be insults. What I've done is ask questions. About your family. About your accomplishments. About the contradictions in your public positions. If questions feel like mocking, examine what you're defending. Harry moved toward the exit. Your audience already hated me before I walked in. My audience had opinions based on your own public statements, your books, your documentaries, your interviews. The hatred you're describing is people who've absorbed everything you've shared and arrived at conclusions you don't like. That's not hatred, that's assessment. Harry paused at the studio door. You'll never understand my situation. Andy stood now, his voice carrying across the clubhouse. I understand entertainment. I've been in it for 30 years. I understand what it looks like when someone has a great story and knows how to tell it. I also understand what it looks like when someone has lost control of their narrative and can't figure out why. He paused. You've lost control. The book didn't help. The documentary didn't help. The interviews haven't helped. You keep explaining and people keep disagreeing. At some point you have to ask whether the explanation is the problem, whether the story you're telling is missing something, whether the context you keep providing actually reveals what you don't want people to see. Harry said nothing. You came here thinking this would be different. A friendly show. A drinking environment. A host who'd go easy on you. But I don't go easy. I ask questions. And when people can't answer, that tells me more than any answer would. Harry left. The studio door closed behind him. Andy turned to face his audience. Well, that just happened. He took a sip of his drink. In over a decade of this show, I've had guests storm off maybe twice. Usually real housewives in the middle of drama. Never someone who came here voluntarily to rehabilitate their image. He set down his glass. What you just witnessed was someone who's spent years controlling their narrative, discovering what happens when they can't control it. I asked about his marriage. Deflection. I asked about his family. Privacy claims. I asked about his accomplishments. Silence. I asked him to play games. Refusal. He looked at the camera. This show works because people let their guard down. They drink. They play. They answer questions they shouldn't. They become human. What I experienced tonight was the opposite. Not a person, a position. Not conversation, calculation. Not engagement, evasion. Here's what concerns me, Andy continued. He had every opportunity. The drinks were offered. The games were available. The questions were no harder than what I ask everyone. He chose to treat all of it as attack. He straightened. When everything feels like attack, you have to ask what's being defended, not what's true. Truth don't need this much defense. What's being defended is narrative, story, brand. And when brand becomes so precious that you can't answer simple questions about your family or your marriage or your accomplishments, when you walk out of a drinking game show because it feels too aggressive, something's deeply wrong. He raised his glass. To everyone who's ever sat in that chair and actually played along. To the celebrities who took the shots, answered the questions, and showed up as human beings rather than managed positions. That's what this show is about. What we saw tonight was the opposite. He drained his drink. When we come back, shots and games with someone who actually wants to have fun. Because that's what this is supposed to be. The footage aired that night. Bravo made no edits. The clips that spread captured the confrontation. Nobody passes. The drink is part of the format. If the complexity isn't clear after all that explanation, maybe it's not complexity, it's contradiction. You control your narrative more completely than any celebrity I've ever met. If people still don't understand, maybe the explanation is the problem. What have you built without the title? Running is your brand at this point. Harry's team released a statement calling the appearance an ambush disguised as entertainment in a format inappropriate for serious discussion. Andy addressed it on the following night's show. Inappropriate format? This is Watch What Happens Live. We drink, we play games, we ask questions. He knew the format when he booked. He thought he could handle it and he couldn't. The ambush he's describing is simply someone who expected him to participate in the show he agreed to do. He added, I've had hundreds of guests in this chair. Some nervous, some defensive, some going through the worst moments of their lives. They played the games. They answered the questions. They engaged like human beings. He couldn't, or wouldn't. And when you can't handle a drinking game show, that says everything about where you are. For Andy Cohen, the interview became an unexpected revelation, proof that the playful format that had disarmed countless celebrities couldn't penetrate defenses that had become permanent. For Prince Harry, it was catastrophic in a particular way. Andy Cohen wasn't serious journalism. He wasn't hostile media. He was the host of a drinking game show, the most casual format imaginable. Being unable to handle Watch What Happens Live, walking out on Andy Cohen's games, exposed something no media strategy could address. But for the millions who watched, something else emerged. The contrast between Andy's playful approach, drinks offered, games proposed, questions asked with humor, and Harry's complete refusal to engage with any of it told its own story. Andy asked him to drink. Harry refused. Andy asked him to play games. Harry refused. Andy asked about his accomplishments independent of his title. Harry provided silence. And in that refusal, in that devastating inability to engage with the most casual format in late-night television, everything anyone needed to know about what Prince Harry had become was revealed. Some people lighten up when given permission to be casual. Others prove they've forgotten how to be anything but defended. Andy offered the clubhouse. Harry rejected it entirely. The host of a drinking game show couldn't get him to play. That's the whole story. Over a decade of late-night chaos, the most casual format in television, and he couldn't take a drink, play a game, or answer a single question without treating it like warfare. What does that tell you? If you want more content that recognizes when the guard has become permanent, subscribe now, turn on notifications, drop a like. More questions, more games, more of what happens when someone can't play along. Stay with us.